The second is the continued naval blockade of Iran, and the third is increasing economic pressure. And of course, in the meantime, if a conflict arises and Iran, as some suggest, carries out attacks on U.S. bases and countries in the region, responding with the forces it has and retaliating severely. Under this strategy, the third part, increasing economic pressure, was announced with much fanfare a few days ago, stating that the U.S. has a major plan to escalate economic pressure on Iran. Mr. Michael Besant, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, gave a detailed interview today to explain this plan. It had been stated previously that it would be announced on Monday, and the gist of his message is that from now on, anyone who cooperates with Iran will be cut off from the dollar, and we will apply pressure to Iran's economic arteries. This includes Iran's digital assets. It is said that Iran holds many billions of dollars in cryptocurrency and digital assets, technology, applying pressure on technologies and technical issues so Iran cannot utilize them. Gold, which is a loophole for bypassing sanctions, and controlling gold transfers, aviation and airports and flights, etc., as well as shipping, ports, and maritime communications. Now, as for what the details of the pressure on these 5 economic arteries will be, how will they act? It is unclear. Mr. Besant mentioned some points, but in his remarks, he also said that branches of Iran's national bank outside of Iran must be closed, as well as other institutions that launder money for Iran and such issues, which, of course, were not all new, as the Americans have said them before. But this kind of pressure on the 5 arteries can be called something new. In any case, it will become clear in practice how serious this method is and how free the US's hand will be. To what extent can it be implemented? What is certain is that as a first step, pressure was applied to Dubai even before the announcement made today, and it seems Dubai has promised to cut all its commercial ties with Iran within a month. This is a move that certainly exerts high pressure, and the reason the dollar suddenly jumped from the 190,000 toman range to the 200,000 toman range is believed by many to be due to Dubai. Today, for some hours, the dollar price in Iran's free market even reached 240,000 tomans, but it later came down. Regardless, every dollar is fluctuating in the range above 200,000 tomans. On the other side, Mr. Ali Madani-Zadeh, the Minister of Economic Affairs and Finance in Mr. Pezeshkian's cabinet, gave a television interview and said that the Americans have done these things before. It has been 47 years of sanctions, and as others have noted, he emphasized that these things Mr. Besant has said are not that simple, and America cannot implement them in practice. He also mentioned that 2 countries have refused from the start and will not implement America's demands. He did not name these two countries, but many believe they are China and Russia. There was also a report that the Chinese foreign minister has said he will not join these sanctions or these American demands. In any case, what is certain is that the most important countries in the current circulation of Iran's economy are Dubai. Now, one of the sheikdoms of the United Arab Emirates, the most important of which is Dubai, and the other is China. This means over 90% of Iran's exports of oil, gas, products, and other items go to China, and over 70% of the country's purchases also come from China. Small banks in China, some of which the Islamic Republic itself has established, work only with the yuan. They have no business outside of China and no business with the dollar. These are the institutions that handle the banking operations for the oil sales that Iran makes to small, so-called teapot refineries in China. They keep the yuan there, and purchases from China are also paid for by these banks using that same yuan to the Chinese seller, and the goods arrive from China. Therefore, if the American plan is to be successful, these two countries must cooperate with it. The UAE seems to have started and has given its word. We must see what it does in practice. As for China, if Mr. Madanizade's view refers to China and Russia, one must say that China has already turned America down from the start. Of course, it remains to be seen whether America, especially with the upcoming negotiations between the two presidents, is willing to engage in a give and take with China and offer concessions in exchange for China's cooperation in this economic siege, or not, and in short, what levers it can put into motion. There was also news that I mentioned in the previous program regarding Mr. Ghalibaf's trip to Iraq, where discussions were held about Iraq potentially taking Iranian oil, without the US being able to control it, to refine it in their facilities, which have a capacity of over 1.5 million barrels per day, and in return, export their own oil and pay the proceeds to Iran. Of course, this would be for a commission, a move that is the reverse of what Iran did for Iraq during the Saddam Hussein sanctions era. It was done. In any case, these loopholes are also being considered. But regarding the bill or law known as the infiltration law, which was announced in Parliament to have had its general outlines approved, it is a bizarre law that, under the pretext of war and in this climate, increases security pressure and suppression on the people in all sectors. It even controls academic exchanges, interviews with journalists, cultural figures, cinema, and theater, not to mention news and so on. In a word, it can be called a bill to North Koreanize the country, especially after Majid Ansari, the vice president for legal and parliamentary affairs in the Pezeshkian administration, stated that the government had informed Parliament that this bill should not be passed and should be returned. Mr. Arif, Mr. Pezeshkian's first vice president, also emphasized today that Mr. Ghalibaf has promised the government he will not let this law be passed and will have it withdrawn. In any case, we have to see what happens in the tug of war between factions in Parliament, and then the weight of the Supreme Leader's office. Because when Khamenei was alive, he would intervene in such situations, and if he wanted a law like this passed behind the scenes, he would put it on the agenda, tell Parliament, and it would be passed. But now, we don't even know if this Mojtaba is alive or dead, or what structure and position the Supreme Leader's office currently has, and whether it can influence Parliament on this matter or not. Regardless, it is a law that should not be passed, as it is an abuse of the war atmosphere to press the regime's boot further onto the people's throats. The great genius Mr. Mohsen Razi, who has become the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council and has been doing many interviews lately, appeared on a television program that covered various dimensions, including the economy. He recommended an economic jihad, meaning that every young person and every family in their neighborhood and home should start producing, and that is how the economic problem would be solved. This has become a source of ridicule and jokes by young people on social media, showing them making pickles and wine at home, among other sexual jokes they have made, giving Mr. Mohsen Razi exactly what he deserves for the ridiculous things he says. Hoping for the victory of Iran and Iranians.